Judge Judy had seen people arrive in court carrying stacks of cash, cashier's checks, handwritten apologies, and even flowers. But nothing in her decades on the bench prepared her for the woman who walked into the courtroom carrying a pink bakery box tied with a bright red ribbon. Karen Lawson smiled confidently, placed the box on the plaintiff's table, and said the words that instantly changed the atmosphere inside the courtroom. "I figured cupcakes are sweeter than writing a check." The courtroom fell silent. A few people in the gallery actually laughed. Karen smiled wider, believing she had already won the room. Judge Judy didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She simply looked at the unopened bakery box, then at Karen. Then quietly asked the bailiff to place the box on the evidence table instead of the plaintiff's desk. Karen looked confused. "They're just cupcakes." Judge Judy replied calmly, "We'll decide what they are after we decide why they're here." The laughter stopped immediately. Experienced judges understand that people rarely bring unusual gifts into court without hoping those gifts accomplish something words cannot. Karen crossed her arms. "I thought this courtroom appreciated good faith." Judge Judy folded her reading glasses and placed them neatly beside the case file. "Good faith arrives before a lawsuit." She paused. "Not after one." Karen's smile weakened for the first time. Across the courtroom sat the plaintiff, David Reynolds, a quiet 49-year-old owner of a family-owned catering company. He didn't even look at the cupcakes. Instead, he carefully held an old spiral notebook with handwritten recipes sticking out from between its worn pages. Judge Judy noticed it immediately. The notebook had stains from flour, butter, and years of use. People don't preserve notebooks like that because they're valuable. They preserve them because they represent a lifetime. The narrator paused because that notebook would soon matter far more than the cupcakes ever could. Before this unbelievable courtroom story goes any deeper, make sure you're subscribed for more unforgettable courtroom dramas where arrogance always meets accountability. And if this is your first time here, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this simple-looking lawsuit is about to become something no one inside that courtroom expected. On paper, the case looked straightforward. David claimed Karen owed him $22,000 after canceling a large corporate catering contract only days before the event. Karen admitted she hadn't paid, but she insisted she had already made things right. She pointed toward the pink bakery box. "I baked those myself." The courtroom exchanged puzzled looks. Judge Judy remained expressionless. "You believe homemade cupcakes satisfy a $22,000 debt?" Karen shrugged. "It's the thought that counts." David finally spoke. "It wasn't about the money anymore." Judge Judy turned toward him. "What was it about?" David gently opened the old notebook. Inside were handwritten recipes passed down through 3 generations of his family. On one page sat the original menu prepared specifically for Karen's corporate event. Every ingredient had been calculated. Every serving handwritten, every page carried small notes in the margins written by David's late mother. Judge Judy studied the notebook carefully. "This isn't just a business ledger." David shook his head. "No." He smiled sadly. "My mother taught me every recipe in that notebook before she passed away." The courtroom grew quiet. This was the largest contract our company had ever received. Karen interrupted with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, please, he's trying to make dessert emotional." Judge Judy slowly looked toward her. People trying to destroy the truth often begin by mocking the person carrying it. David continued calmly. "I hired temporary employees. I bought ingredients. I turned away 3 other weddings that weekend because I believed her contract." Judge Judy nodded. "And when did she cancel?" David looked directly at Karen for the first time, 6 hours before delivery. Karen immediately defended herself. "I changed my mind." Judge Judy calmly wrote one sentence in her notes. Asterisk, "Changing your mind does not erase someone else's losses." Karen leaned back confidently. "That's why I brought the cupcakes." Judge Judy quietly reached toward the bakery box. She didn't open it, not yet. Instead, She noticed something tucked beneath the ribbon, a folded receipt. Only part of it was visible, just enough to reveal the name of a commercial bakery. Judge Judy rested one finger on the ribbon, then looked directly at Karen. "Mrs. Lawson," Karen smiled confidently. "Yes? You testified these cupcakes were homemade." Karen nodded. "Absolutely." Judge Judy gently slid the folded receipt from beneath the ribbon without opening the box. Her eyes moved to the store logo at the top. The courtroom hadn't seen it yet, but Judge Judy had. And in that single moment, she realized the cupcakes themselves might become the first piece of evidence proving Karen had lied before the hearing had truly begun. The courtroom remained perfectly still. Karen Lawson continued smiling, completely unaware that Judge Judy was no longer looking at the cupcakes. She was looking at the receipt. It was folded neatly beneath the ribbon, almost as if someone had tucked it there at the last second. Judge Judy carefully unfolded it. She didn't rush. Truth has a rhythm of its own. When revealed too quickly, people focus on the surprise. When revealed patiently, they focus on the choice. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and read the top line silently. Then she looked back at Karen. "Mrs. Lawson." Karen answered confidently, "Yes, you testified these cupcakes were homemade." "I did." Judge Judy held up the receipt. "This receipt is from Sweet Magnolia Bakery." Karen's smile flickered. Only for a moment. Then she laughed. "Oh, right." She waved her hand dismissively. "They helped decorate them." Judge Judy made no comment. She simply placed the receipt beside the case file. Experienced judges recognize something important. An innocent correction usually comes immediately. A guilty correction usually arrives only after evidence forces it to. Karen crossed her arms. "They're still cupcakes." Judge Judy nodded. "They are." She paused. "But they're no longer homemade." The gallery remained silent. Karen looked toward the plaintiff. "Does it really matter where they came from?" David Reynolds slowly opened the worn recipe notebook again. "It matters because that's exactly how this whole case started." Judge Judy turned toward him. "Explain." David carefully flipped through the stained pages until he reached a handwritten contract checklist. "My family has catered events for nearly 30 years." He smiled softly as his fingers rested on the faded handwriting. "My mother taught me something before every contract." Judge Judy waited. "Never promise what you haven't already prepared to deliver." The narrator paused. "Sybil advice often survives because life keeps proving it true," David continued. "When Karen hired us, she promised payment in 3 stages. He placed 3 invoices on the evidence table. Deposit, production payment, final balance. Judge Judy reviewed them carefully. The deposit cleared. Yes. The second payment?" David shook his head. "Delayed, and the final payment? Never happened." Karen immediately interrupted. "Because I canceled." Judge Judy looked directly at her. "When?" Karen shrugged. "The morning of the event." David quietly corrected her. 6 hours before delivery. Judge Judy compared the timestamps. The catering trucks had already been loaded. Temporary staff had already arrived. Fresh ingredients had already been prepared. Custom desserts had already been boxed. Nothing could be returned. Nothing could be reused. This case wasn't simply about canceling. It was about timing. Changing plans is one thing. Waiting until another person cannot recover is something entirely different. Judge Judy folded the invoices together. "Mr. Reynolds." "Yes, Your Honor." "What did canceling 6 hours before delivery cost you?" David reached beneath the notebook and removed another folder. Unlike the family recipes, these pages were business records, payroll, food purchases, rental equipment, specialty ingredients. Every expense had been highlighted. Judge Judy examined each page slowly. "You hired 12 temporary employees." "Yes." "You rented refrigeration trailers." "Yes." "You purchased imported ingredients specifically requested by Mrs. Lawson." "Correct." Karen sighed dramatically. "I never forced him." Judge Judy calmly responded. "No." She looked directly at Karen. "You signed a contract." Karen rolled her eyes. "It's catering. Plans change." Judge Judy nodded. They do. She paused just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of her next words. Responsible people accept the cost of changing them. Karen shifted in her chair. The confidence she had entered with wasn't disappearing all at once. It was fading piece by piece. Just like every explanation she had offered, David quietly removed one final item from the old notebook. It wasn't another invoice. It was a handwritten menu. Every course had tiny notes written in blue ink. Judge Judy noticed the handwriting immediately differed from David's. "Who wrote these?" David smiled sadly. "My mother." He gently traced one corner of the page. "She passed away 2 years ago." The courtroom became silent. These were the last menu revisions she ever made. Judge Judy carefully held the page, so when Mrs. Lawson canceled, David nodded. "We threw away almost everything." He looked toward Karen. "But losing food wasn't the hardest part," Judge Judy asked quietly. "What was?" David closed the notebook. "Watching the last menu my mother ever helped create end up in a dumpster." Even Karen's attorney lowered his eyes. Judge Judy slowly placed the notebook back on the table. This lawsuit suddenly looked much larger than unpaid catering. On paper, it involved $22,000. In reality, it involved trust, legacy, and promises carelessly broken. She rested one hand on the unopened bakery box once more, then looked toward Karen. Mrs. Lawson, Karen forced another smile. "Yes? If these cupcakes were never intended to repay the debt," Judge Judy lightly tapped the box, "then why did you bring them to court at all?" Karen hesitated. For the first time that morning, she didn't have an answer ready. Karen Lawson didn't answer immediately. For the first time since entering the courtroom, the silence belonged to her instead of everyone else. She glanced toward her attorney. He offered no rescue. Judge Judy had seen this moment countless times before. People who expect charm to solve a problem often struggle the moment they are asked to explain their intentions instead of their actions. Karen finally straightened in her chair. "I brought them because I wanted to show I wasn't a bad person." Judge Judy didn't react. "Those are two different things." Karen frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means bringing cupcakes to court doesn't answer why you ignored a legally binding contract." The room grew quiet again. The narrator observed what everyone could now see. Karen wasn't trying to prove she was right anymore. She was trying to prove she was likable. And those are never the same argument. Judge Judy turned another page in the file. "Mrs. Lawson, tell me about the event." Karen seemed relieved to move to a different topic. "It was a corporate appreciation gala for my marketing company." She sat taller. "We host one every year." David remained silent. Karen continued confidently. "We had nearly 300 guests expected." Judge Judy nodded. "And then?" Karen shrugged. "I found another caterer." David looked up for the first time. Judge Judy noticed it immediately. His expression wasn't angry, it was disappointment. Disappointment often hurts longer than anger. Judge Judy asked calmly, "When did you hire the other caterer?" Karen hesitated. "About a week before." The courtroom became noticeably still. Judge Judy didn't interrupt. She simply waited. Silence has a way of inviting the truth or exposing the lack of it. Karen continued, "I wanted to compare prices." Judge Judy looked down at the contract. "So you had already secured another catering company before canceling Mr. Reynolds?" Karen nodded cautiously. "Yes." David slowly opened another section of his folder. "I wondered if she'd admit that." Karen turned sharply. "What is that supposed to mean?" David carefully removed several printed emails. "I only discovered it afterward." Judge Judy accepted the documents. The first email came from Karen. It praised David's menu and confirmed the event. The second thanked another catering company for saving the day. Its timestamp caught Judge Judy's attention. It had been sent nearly 5 days before Karen canceled David's contract. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "You had already chosen another company." Karen shifted in her seat. "They offered a discount." "So why didn't you cancel immediately?" Karen's answer came too quickly. "I was keeping my options open." Judge Judy leaned back. "No, Karen blinked. No, you were keeping Mr. Reynolds unavailable. The sentence landed like a weight in the courtroom. Judge Judy continued, while he reserved his staff, ingredients, and calendar for your event. She held up the second email. You were negotiating with someone else. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. The narrator spoke quietly. Experienced judges recognize a particular kind of dishonesty. It isn't always the loud lie. Sometimes it's allowing someone else to continue relying on a promise you've already decided to break. Judge Judy looked toward David. Did you decline other work because of this contract? Yes. How much? David handed over another sheet. 3 weddings. Judge Judy reviewed the schedule. Each date matched Karen's event. Each had been marked Odeverson. One included a handwritten note from David's late mother. Never overbook. Your reputation is worth more than one extra paycheck. Judge Judy rested her hand on the notebook. That single sentence revealed the difference between the two people sitting before her. One treated promises as temporary conveniences. The other treated them as permanent responsibilities Karen tried to recover. I didn't think he'd lose that much. Judge Judy looked directly at her. You didn't ask. Karen swallowed. I assumed. Judge Judy interrupted gently. Assumptions don't replace obligations. The courtroom could feel the balance shifting. Karen had entered believing this lawsuit was about unpaid invoices. Now it had become a story about calculated decisions. Judge Judy studied Karen's body language. She noticed something subtle. Every difficult question caused Karen to look toward the bakery box, not toward the contract, not toward the evidence, toward the cupcakes, as though she still believed that simple gesture could soften what the documents had already established. People sometimes cling to symbols long after they've lost the facts. Judge Judy folded her hands. Mrs. Lawson, Karen looked up hopefully. Yes, you've spent more time defending those cupcakes than explaining your contract. Karen's face flushed. The gallery remained silent. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She reached into the court file and pulled out a sealed envelope that had not yet been discussed. This arrived from the second catering company yesterday afternoon. Karen's confident expression disappeared. Her attorney slowly turned toward the envelope. What is that? Judge Judy rested the unopened envelope beside the bakery box. The answer to a question no one has asked yet. Karen's breathing became uneven because she suddenly realized there was one conversation she had hoped would never leave the kitchen where it happened. And Judge Judy was about to bring that conversation into the courtroom. Judge Judy rested one hand on the sealed envelope. She didn't open it. Not yet. Karen Lawson couldn't take her eyes off it. Moments earlier, she had been talking confidently about discounts, business decisions, and keeping her options open. Now, every ounce of that confidence seemed tied to whatever was inside a plain white envelope from the very company she claimed had simply offered her a better deal. Judge Judy noticed the change immediately. Experienced judges learn that people rarely fear paper. They fear what paper remembers. Karen forced a nervous laugh. So, are we really going to make a big deal out of another caterer? Judge Judy looked at her over the rim of her glasses. I don't know yet, she paused, but you seem to. The courtroom became silent again. David Reynolds quietly folded his mother's recipe notebook shut. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He simply waited. After everything he had lost, he had learned that truth doesn't need applause. It only needs time. Judge Judy carefully broke the seal. Inside were 3 documents and a handwritten note. She picked up the note first. It had been signed by Olivia Grant, owner of Grant Premier Catering. Judge Judy read the opening sentence silently before looking toward Karen. Mrs. Lawson. Karen swallowed. Yes? Did you tell Ms. Grant that Mr. Reynolds had become unreliable? Karen hesitated. I might have said something like that. Judge Judy read directly from the letter. Karen Lawson informed our company that David Reynolds had staffing problems, could not guarantee food safety, and would likely cancel at the last minute. She asked us to keep our conversations confidential until she officially terminated his contract. A ripple moved through the gallery. David lowered his eyes. Not because he was ashamed, because hearing the lie spoken aloud hurt more than reading it on paper. Judge Judy slowly placed the letter on the bench. So before you canceled his contract? She looked directly at Karen. You had already begun damaging his professional reputation. Karen immediately protested. I was just explaining why I wanted another caterer. Judge Judy shook her head. No, she tapped the letter. You were creating a story to justify a decision you'd already made. The narrator spoke softly. When someone cannot defend their actions, they often begin attacking another person's character. It is one of the oldest courtroom strategies, and one of the easiest for evidence to expose. Karen's attorney leaned toward her. For the first time all afternoon, he whispered something urgently. Karen barely nodded. Judge Judy noticed. She always noticed. Bodies confess before mouths do. Before the truth goes any further, tell us in the comments. What do you think was inside that sealed envelope? And if you can already see where this case is heading, comment *justice below. Judge Judy reached for the second document. It wasn't a contract. It was an email chain. She read the dates carefully. 5 days before Karen canceled David, 4 days before, 3 days before. Every email showed Karen negotiating prices with Grant Premier Catering while continuing to reassure David that everything was perfectly on schedule. Judge Judy held up the pages. Mr. Reynolds. Yes, Your Honor. When did Mrs. Lawson last confirm the event with you? David answered quietly. The evening before she canceled. Judge Judy compared the time-stamped Perrin's message to David read, Everything looks wonderful. My guests are going to love your menu. Just 23 minutes earlier, Karen had emailed the second caterer. You're hired. Please don't tell the first company until I handle it. The courtroom gasped. Karen's face turned pale. Judge Judy laid both emails side by side. They were sent less than half an hour apart. Karen whispered, I didn't know which company I wanted. Judge Judy remained perfectly calm. No. She looked directly into Karen's eyes. You already knew. The silence that followed was heavier than any raised voice. Karen tried one last defense. I never meant to hurt him. Judge Judy answered quietly. Intent matters. She placed her hand on David's worn recipe notebook. But consequences matter too. Then she reached for the third and final document inside the envelope. Unlike the others, it was stamped with the logo of Grant Premier Catering's accounting office. Judge Judy glanced at the first line. Her expression didn't change, but the courtroom could feel something had. She slowly closed the folder. Looked toward Karen, then toward David. Finally, she spoke. This, she lifted the document slightly, changes far more than the amount of damages. Karen's attorney closed his eyes, because he had already read the title at the top of the page, Internal Discount, Authorization, and Client Communications Log. Judge Judy carefully turned the first page. The truth wasn't about to arrive through emotion. It was about to arrive through records that no one in the courtroom, except Karen, had ever expected to see. Judge Judy held the final document without saying a word. The courtroom watched her eyes move slowly from the first line to the last. Karen Lawson stopped breathing for what felt like several seconds. Her attorney leaned back in his chair. He already knew that whatever Judge Judy had just read had changed the direction of the entire hearing. Truth rarely announces itself. Sometimes it is disguised as paperwork no one thought another person would ever see. Judge Judy finally looked up. Mrs. Lawson. Karen answered quietly. Yes. You testified that Grant Premier Catering simply offered a lower price. Karen nodded. That's correct. Judge Judy lifted the accounting report. This document tells a very different story. She handed a copy to the bailiff, who placed it on the courtroom monitor. The heading appeared on the screen. Austria Internal Discount, Authorization, and Client Communications Log. Judge Judy pointed to one highlighted section. This company only approves discounts greater than 15% when a written reason is submitted. She looked back at Karen. "Would you like me to read the reason?" Karen's face lost what little color remained. "No." Judge Judy continued anyway. Customer requested immediate replacement after intentionally delaying cancellation with previous vendor in order to maintain a backup option until final executive approval. A collective gasp spread through the gallery. David closed his eyes, not because he was surprised, because someone besides him had finally said the truth out loud. Judge Judy continued reading. Customer acknowledged original caterer had already purchased supplies, but stated, "That's his problem, not mine." The courtroom froze. Karen covered her mouth. "I never thought they'd keep that." Judge Judy looked directly at her. "Businesses often keep records." She paused. "Especially when a customer gives them a reason to." Karen's attorney slowly lowered his head. There was no longer a legal strategy. Only damage control. Judge Judy carefully placed the document beside David's invoices. The contract proved the agreement. She pointed toward the payroll records. The expenses proved the financial loss. She tapped the email chain. The communications proved the deception. Finally, she rested one hand on the accounting log. And this proves intent. The narrator spoke softly. The first pieces of evidence created doubt. The next pieces established a timeline, but intent transforms poor judgment into calculated conduct. Karen suddenly stood. "I made a mistake." Judge Judy calmly replied, "Sit down." Karen obeyed immediately. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Judge Judy remained composed. "No." She folded her hands. "You meant for another company to replace Mr. Reynolds." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "You meant to hide that decision until the last possible moment." Another pause. "You meant to protect yourself," Karen whispered. "Yes," Judge Judy continued. "And when he asked to be paid for losses your decision caused." She glanced toward the unopened bakery box. "You offered cupcakes." Karen began crying openly. "I thought it would make things better." David quietly answered before Judge Judy could speak. "It made me feel like my work meant nothing." Those words struck harder than any financial document. The courtroom wasn't thinking about invoices anymore. It was thinking about dignity. Judge Judy slowly reached toward the pink bakery box. For the first time since the hearing began, she opened it. Inside sat 12 beautifully decorated cupcakes. Perfect frosting. Perfect flowers. Perfect presentation. Judge Judy lifted one carefully. Then she noticed something beneath the cardboard tray, another folded piece of paper. The bailiff removed it. It was the original price tag from Sweet Magnolia Bakery, 12 premium cupcakes. Total cost, $84.95. Judge Judy looked from the receipt to David's documented losses, $22,000. She looked back at Karen. "You believed $84.95 could replace months of preparation." She rested the receipt beside the contract. "Because you never understood what you were actually asking him to forgive." Karen couldn't answer. She simply cried. The courtroom remained silent. David gently closed his mother's recipe notebook one last time. Judge Judy organized every document into a single stack: the contract, the invoices, the emails, the accounting log, the bakery receipt. Every piece fit together like chapters of the same story. She removed her glasses and looked directly at both parties. "The court has heard enough." No one moved. Karen's attorney quietly gathered his pen. David held his notebook close to his chest. Judge Judy placed one hand over the complete evidence file. The next words she spoke would determine not only the financial judgment, but whether respect, honesty, and responsibility still carried value when weighed against excuses wrapped in a pink bakery box. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Judy looked at the evidence one final time before closing the thick case file. There was no uncertainty left, no missing explanation, no overlooked document. Every promise Karen had made had been contradicted by her own emails. Every excuse had been dismantled by business records. and the pink bakery box that she believed would make her appear generous had become the final symbol of how little she understood the damage she had caused. Judge Judy folded her hands. Mrs. Lawson. Karen slowly looked up. Her confidence had disappeared completely. Yes, Your Honor, when this hearing began, you wanted this courtroom to believe you came here with kindness. Karen nodded through tears. I did. Judge Judy spoke with the same calm voice she had maintained all afternoon. Kindness isn't measured by gifts. She pointed toward David's notebook. It's measured by whether you honor the commitments people build their lives around. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Judy continued. You entered into a written agreement. You encouraged Mr. Reynolds to continue preparing for your event. You secretly hired another caterer. You delayed canceling until the last possible moment. You damaged his professional reputation before ending the contract, and when he simply asked to recover the losses your choices created, she gently rested her hand on the bakery box. You offered him cupcakes. Karen buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry. Judge Judy looked at her for several long seconds. The unfortunate reality, Mrs. Lawson, is that apologies offered after evidence appears often sound very different from apologies offered when the harm first occurs. Karen couldn't disagree because she knew it was true. Judge Judy turned toward David Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, yes, Your Honor. The evidence presented today establishes that your losses were direct, foreseeable, and entirely preventable. David nodded quietly. Judge Judy reviewed the financial records one last time. The court awards judgment in your favor. Karen closed her eyes. Judge Judy continued. You are awarded $22,000 for the documented business losses. She paused. An additional $3,000 is awarded for the measurable reputational harm resulting from knowingly false statements made to another business. The total appeared on the clerk's paperwork. $25,000. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery. Karen remained frozen. Judge Judy looked directly at her and delivered the sentence that everyone in the courtroom would remember. Asterisk. A thoughtful gift never replaces an honest obligation, because integrity cannot be baked, boxed, or borrowed. No one spoke. Even Karen's attorney slowly removed his glasses. He understood that this case had never truly been about catering. Judge Judy continued. The clerk will provide copies of today's judgment to both parties. She glanced toward David. I also encourage Mr. Reynolds to pursue restoration of any business opportunities affected by the false statements discussed today. David stood quietly. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Judy gave a respectful nod. No. She looked at the worn recipe notebook. Thank your mother. The courtroom became silent once again. Judge Judy continued. Those handwritten notes taught you something contracts alone never could. David smiled softly. They did. You honored those lessons. David carefully opened the notebook one last time. Inside the front cover, written in faded blue ink, were the words his mother had written decades earlier. Good food feeds people for a day. Honest work feeds your name for a lifetime. David gently closed the notebook. He didn't smile because he had won money. He smiled because someone had finally recognized the value behind those pages. Karen remained seated long after the hearing ended. The unopened cupcakes were left behind on the evidence table. No one asked to take them home. Within 24 hours, word of the judgment spread throughout the local business community. Several former clients who had heard the false rumors contacted David personally after learning the truth. Within 48 hours, 2 of the weddings he had previously lost referred new customers to his family business. Within 72 hours, Grant Premier Catering publicly clarified that David Reynolds had never failed to honor a contract and that Karen's statements did not reflect their experience with him. His reputation slowly returned, not because of advertising, because the truth finally caught up with the lie. Karen's business, however, faced difficult questions from clients who valued honesty more than excuses. She eventually paid the judgment in full, But what stayed with her wasn't the amount, it was the realization that one careless decision had cost far more than money. The narrator reflected on why this fictional courtroom story continued to resonate with so many viewers. At first glance, it looked like a simple contract dispute, one customer, one caterer, one unpaid bill. But beneath the paperwork lay something much deeper. Promises, trust, family legacy, respect for another person's work. David never walked into court asking for sympathy. He walked in carrying his mother's recipe notebook because it reminded him who he was before anyone questioned his integrity. Karen believed a decorative box of cupcakes could replace accountability. Judge Judy reminded everyone watching that genuine accountability is never wrapped in ribbon. It is shown through honesty, responsibility, and the courage to make things right before a courtroom ever becomes necessary. If this story reminded you that integrity is always worth more than appearances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more unforgettable courtroom dramas, and share it with someone who believes promises should still mean something. And tell us in the comments, what moment convinced you Karen had already lost the case?